Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We are continuing our journey into enterprise cloud adoption.
That's right. And we're leaning heavily on the insights from, the well-regarded enterprise cloud architect, Darren Lester, DASBO, his articles, his presentations on Google Cloud adoption.
Absolutely. And if you've been with us, you'll know we've laid some groundwork already.
We have strategy, goals, how open source fits in. We talked through all that.
In the business case, that high-level cost estimate, right? And setting out those core adoption principles.
The rules of the road, basically, guiding the whole thing.
Okay, so the big picture, the why, the initial cost idea, the guidelines, that's sorted. But before you can actually move anything, there's this huge fundamental step.
Figuring out what you actually have today on the ground.
Exactly. It's like you can't pack for a big move if you haven't even looked in all the rooms and cupboards yet. It could be, messy.
You got it. That first estimate. Purely high level. Now, DASBO's work really stresses this. We need to get granular. We need the details.
As is view, right?
Precisely. And the mission for this deep dive, it's all about building that picture and starting to see how it might map to Google Cloud, specifically using Google Cloud Migration Center to kick things off, discovery, initial assessment.
All right, let's dive in. Building this as is view. Why is this level of detail so critical right now?
Well, it's fundamental. You just can't make smart choices about how to migrate something, or even if you should migrate it, without knowing it inside out.
What it is, what it depends on, everything.
Everything. What application, what infrastructure, what dependencies. It's layers of information way beyond just counting servers.
And the source material, DASBO stuff, really breaks this down well, layer by layer, starting right at the top with the business apps.
Right. And not just a list. I mean, in big companies, you're talking hundreds, maybe thousands of applications.
Wow.
Yeah. So the goal isn't just inventory. Ideally, you map those apps to actual business capabilities. What do they do for the business?
That frames it in terms of value, I suppose.
Exactly. Then, for each app, you dig deeper. Attributes. Like availability needs. What if it goes down?
RTORPO stuff.
Yes. Absolutely critical. Your recovery time objective, how fast does it need to be back? And recovery point objective, how much data can you afford to lose?
Yeah.
These directly impact your cloud design.
And how users connect. Thick client. Web.
Yeah. Is it some old clunky thing on desktops or a modern web app? How does authentication work? Authorization. These aren't small details. They really affect the migration complexity.
Plus, you need to know the plan for the app itself, right? Its future intent, decommissioning, upgrade.
And this is where the source gives a really sharp warning.
Oh.
If an app has a real funded plan to be turned off soon, maybe you can descope it from migration. Maybe, but in DASBO really hammers us to be super careful about excluding things based on just like vague hopes. Oh, we plan to decommission that in 2 years.
Because those plans often slip.
They often don't happen. And then you're stuck.
I get
A critical app, not discovered, not planned for migration. It's a classic trap.
Ouch. Okay, vital reality check there. So, understand the app, its traits, its real future. Then where does it live now?
Hosting location. On-prem data center. So,
Yep.
already in another cloud.
And for a typical migration, we're focusing mainly on the on-prem stuff for discovery.
Generally, yes.
Yeah.
That's the main target for this kind of lift and shift planning, initially at least.
And for those on-prem apps, you need even more detail. Licensing, support.
Exactly. Licensing can be a nightmare in the cloud, huge cost implications. Who's the vendor support contact? Where's the source code? How easy is it to reinstall? Is the documentation any good? Got test scripts.
All signs pointing to effort and risk.
Totally. And crucially, who owns it? Who are the subject matter experts, the SMEs, the people who really know it? You have to find them.
Okay, applications covered. But they don't run in a vacuum. They run on stuff, rely on stuff.
Precisely. The underpinning environment. What application servers? IBM WebSphere, Oracle WebLogic, JBoss, Tomcat, Spring Boot, web servers like IHS.
Runtime versions too. Java, .NET.
Yep. Specific Java versions, .NET Framework versions, Python versions, and the databases Oracle, SQL Server, DB2, Postgres, MySQL, MongoDB. Again, exact versions matter hugely. Compatibility, licensing.
And then the shared stuff, the dependencies, middleware, infrastructure services.
This is where it gets really tangled. Shared user directories, Active Directory usually, messaging queues, IBM MQ perhaps, shared storage, API gateways, CI/CD pipelines, schedulers, monitoring tools.
Wow. Okay, so all these shared things the apps depend on.
You need to identify them and figure out how that dependency gets met in the cloud. Migrate the shared service. Replace it with a cloud equivalent. Reconfigure the app. Big questions.
It really is building this incredibly detailed, intertwined map.
Mm-hmm.
And underneath all that software, VMs or physical boxes?
Correct. The final layer. Identify the specific VMs or physical servers running all this. And for each VM, vCPUs, memory, storage, OS version, IP address, even the physical cluster it sits on.
That is just an enormous amount of detail. Technical business. It feels overwhelming.
It is overwhelming at enterprise scale. And the source notes, Google calls this discovery, but Dasbo likes the term application to infrastructure mapping, AIM.
AIM, application to infrastructure mapping. I like that. It emphasizes the connection.
Yeah, it's not just listing servers. It's tracing the line, business function, right down to the silicon.
Okay, so if you need all this data, where does it ideally live?
In a perfect world, your configuration management database. Your CMDB.
Ah, the CMDB. That almost mythical single source of truth everyone dreams of.
Precisely. And the source material points out, CMDBs aren't just for IT service management like incidents and changes. They are invaluable for migration planning.
Tools like ServiceNow, BMC, Atrium.
Those are common ones, yeah. They have strong CMDB capabilities.
And what is a good CMDB track that helps here?
It stores configuration items, CIs, details on every asset, its configuration, network gear, servers, VMs, storage, OS, installed apps, even patches. Key phrase, though. Ideally up to date.
Which isn't always the case.
Often not. But beyond migration, CMDBs help with incident management, compliance, capacity planning, lots of uses.
And a mature one can automate discovery.
Yeah.
Find new things. Map dependencies.
Should do, yes. Continuous discovery, dependency mapping. They capture most infrastructure attributes we need, maybe less on the forward-looking roadmap stuff. They often have visualizations, too, showing how things connect.
So the ideal is this living, breathing, accurate map.
Exactly. Can even spot common software automatically. ServiceNow, for example, can find OS, apps, databases, network services. It's pretty powerful when it works.
The reality check. The source contrasts this ideal with what many places actually have.
Sadly, yes. The reality is often spreadsheets. Manually updated, instantly stale spreadsheets tracking critical info. And for any decent-sized enterprise, the source calls that approach futile.
Futile. Strong word.
But accurate. The data's old, incomplete, unreliable. Trying to migrate a large enterprise based on spreadsheets. Just forget it.
I can absolutely see why. Things change too fast.
Yeah. And even if you do have a good CMDB, maybe an enterprise architecture tool too, the source admits getting a truly complete, perfectly reliable picture. Still, incredibly hard.
There's always some dark matter. Undocumented stuff.
Almost always. Forgotten apps, unknown dependencies, and that dark matter. Big risk for migration.
Okay. Need the detailed picture. CMDB helps, but reality is messy.
Yeah.
This is where Google Cloud Migration Center comes in, right?
Yeah.
Even without a perfect CMDB.
Exactly. Back to Google's process. Estimate, discover, assess, plan, migrate. We are now firmly in Discover. Migration Center is Google's unified tool for this, gathering deep infrastructure data regardless of your CMDB maturity. It replaces some older tools.
How do you feed it the data?
Two main ways. One, import existing data. If you have a decent CMDB like ServiceNow or VMware exports from RV Tools or even scripts to pull from AWS Azure, you can often import that, usually via CSV.
Leverage what you've got. Makes sense. And if not,
Path 2. Run the Migration Center Discovery Client. Downloadable tool. There's a Linux CLI for quick scans, but the recommended way for ongoing discovery is the Windows GUI client.
okay, walk me through setting that up.
Sure. First, you need a Google Cloud project. That's your container for the data. It owns the migration info.
Okay.
Then, in the Google Cloud Console, you enable Migration Center, the APIs, and set some initial preferences, how you want the tool to assess things.
Preferences like?
Target region in Google Cloud, how hot you want the target VMs, utilization, your committed use discount plans, OS licensing PAYG from Google or BYOL, bring your own license. You can change these later, but good to set defaults.
Got it. Project, service, preferences. How does the data get in securely?
You set up a service account in your Google Cloud project. Give it the right permissions so the discovery client running on-prem can authenticate and securely upload data to your project.
Right. Secure channel sorted.
Yeah.
Where does the client software run?
You download it from Migration Center in the console, install it on a Windows Server VM on-prem, needs Windows Server 2012 R2 or newer.
And that collector VM needs network access.
Oh, yeah. Outbound to Google APIs. And critically, access to all the machines you want to scan in your environment. Might need multiple collectors if your network is heavily segmented.
Makes sense. Install client, sort network paths. Then run the scan.
Yep. Launch the client on that Windows VM. It asks how you want to scan. Options depend on what info you need and what credentials you have.
What are the main scan types?
Recommended is OS scan. Gives you VM metadata, performance data over time, and installed software and services. But needs admin rights on Windows targets or sufficient user rights on Linux.
What if getting those OS creds everywhere is tough?
If you're heavy on VMware and can't get OS creds, use vSphere Scan. Connects to vSphere, gets VM config and performance, but not the inside OS software details. Needs vSphere creds. There's also a specific database scan for IPs, have databases. Needs database creds, gets DB type, names, sizing, usage, tables, objects. That level of detail.
So choose the scan method, give it credentials,
Yeah.
tell it what to scan IP ranges or a CSV list.
Exactly. Link credentials to assets or ranges. Hit start.
And then magic happens in the cloud console.
Pretty much. Data uploads securely, scan finishes, assets pop up in Migration Center in your Google Cloud Console, ready to examine.
Fantastic. So now you have this wealth of data. VMs, specs, OS, usage, maybe software. First step with this treasure trove.
Examine it and start grouping the assets.
Grouping. Why group them?
Organization, segmentation, group by workload type, application, business unit, whatever makes sense for you. It helps manage the sheer volume of data, aligns with your plans, and defines scope for migration waves.
Is it easy to make groups in Migration Center?
Yeah, it's pretty flexible. You can filter on any metadata collected, like filter by OS. Boom, there's your Windows 2016 group. Another for Red Hat Linux. Make as many groups as you need.
And once they're griefed, what do you see?
This is where it gets really cool. Migration Center starts giving automated suggestions for target products and configurations in Google Cloud, right there in the console.
So for a VM, it might suggest a specific GCE instance type?
Exactly. Based on the performance data it collected, it recommends a suitable GCE machine type and size.
So it's mapping as is to a potential to be GCE instance.
Precisely. First step in that mapping. And directly linked to that, cost estimates.
You can get a TCO report already.
Yes. Big benefit at this stage. Uses the collected data, the proposed targets, factors in those preferences you set, and generates a total cost of ownership report.
Based just on the discovered data. No manual input needed.
That's the beauty. Uses what it found about your current scale and usage. The report shows estimated costs for the whole estate, or drilled down by group.
And those migration preferences, target region, licensing, discounts, they affect the TCO.
Massively. You can model different scenarios. What if we target a Central one versus Europe West one? What if we plan for 3-year CUDs? PAYG versus BOL. And critically, right sizing.
Right sizing. Shrinking VMs based on actual use.
You got it. Based on CPU metrics collected, it can suggest smaller target VMs if yours are oversized. Options are usually migrate as is, same size or bigger, moderate right sizing, target maybe 7% peak CPU, or aggressive, target maybe 90% peak CPU. Huge cost impact potentially.
So you can model different approaches. Aggressive on dev test, maybe less so on prod.
Exactly. Apply different preferences to different groups. The TCO report gives you side-by-side comparisons. You can even export it as presentation slides. Super useful for refining the business case.
And it gives other insights too, like container potential.
Yeah, it provides a broader assessment summary mix of workloads, recommendations, even some initial analysis on refactoring VMs to containers.
Okay, this sounds incredibly powerful for getting that initial grip.
But
the source material has a big but here, doesn't it? About this initial TCO being just the tip of the iceberg.
yes, and this is maybe the most crucial takeaway from this part. That initial TCO report, it's very, very IS-oriented. Meaning it's mostly costing out running your current stuff as infrastructure as a service in Google Cloud. Lift and shift, taking your VMs, running them as GCE VMs. The workloads themselves don't fundamentally change how they operate.
Okay, so like for like, but on cloud infrastructure.
Fundamentally, yes, and that's vital as a starting point, understanding the baseline cost. But it doesn't capture the real value, the potential savings from using cloud-native services properly.
Moving beyond just running VMs in the cloud.
Precisely. It doesn't account for shifting databases to PIOS, using managed message queues, re-architecting to serverless, using containers effectively. All the things that cut operational overhead and often run much cheaper, scale better, are more resilient.
So the true target state TCO after transformation could be much better than this first IS estimate suggests.
Absolutely. Could be significantly better. This first TCO is essential for SOAPing, initial planning based on what you have now, but it's not the final economic story. The real optimization comes later by rethinking the target state.
Right. That puts it in perspective. Okay, so wrapping up this deep dive.
Yep.
We focused hard on discover, getting granular on the as-is.
Yep. Why you need deep understanding of apps, attributes, dependencies, infrastructure, how CMDBs fit in but aren't always enough, and how tools like Migration Center automate so much of this.
And using Migration Center gets you assessed assets, initial GCP target suggestions, and those crucial first IS-based TCO numbers.
Yes, and related to that AIM idea, application to infrastructure mapping, the source mentions building a hosting on a page, or HOA view. Yeah, it's like a visual map, tiered. Business capability down through apps, middleware platforms to the metal or VMs. Super useful for seeing dependencies, deciding what to consolidate, replace, keep, ditch before migrating. An EA repository helps, but it's valuable even without one.
Okay, so we've mapped the as-is, got initial cost, understand the limits of that first TCO. What's next in this series? Where do we go from here?
Logically, building on this as-is map, maybe using that HOEP idea, we move into the assess phase. Taking those discovered patterns and capabilities and mapping them to target state cloud capabilities, that's where you unlock more value.
Moving beyond lift and shift.
Exactly. Making strategic choices about pay-as, managed services, serverless, aiming for that much better TCO and the real cloud benefits.
Sounds like where the serious transformation strategy kicks in.
It absolutely is.
All right, so to wrap this one up, knowing your existing IT estate in painstaking detail, it's not just nice to have, it's foundational for cloud migration success.
Couldn't agree more. You can't plan for what you don't understand. And tools like Google Cloud Migration Center are a massive help, automating data gathering, giving initial cost estimates, huge step up from spreadsheets.
But as we stress, that initial IS TCO, useful, vital for early stages, but just the start of the financial story.
Precisely. The big wins, cost, agility, value, often come from reimagining how workloads run using cloud-native services. Beyond just VMs, that's the transformation.
A lot to digest there. Crucial groundwork. And speaking of complexity, here's that provocative thought for you to ponder. Given how complex enterprise IT is, always changing, can you ever have a truly perfect 100% complete picture? And what's the real risk, the hidden cost, of that inevitable dark matter lurking in your environment when you start migrating?
That's the question, isn't it? Definitely keeps IT leaders awake at night. Worth thinking about.
Indeed. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into discovery and assessment. We'll catch you next time as we start mapping to that cloud potential.